lecture rooms, and with a big screen over there and an enormous screen over there, and I was on this massive stage, and 2 attendees. I just sat on the edge of this stage and had a chat with them. That was fun. I'm not trying to say that my sessions are usually really boring and everybody has figured that out by now. Well, work, and then you find it. I ran into this and I had to figure it out for myself, so I played around a lot with how do you make backups in Azure. This should be easy, right? We've been DBA since what? There's an intro session this thing for me, but gray hair. I've been a DBA for a while. Anyhow, let's get into that. Like I said, since we're a small crew, if you have questions or you want to try something, I don't know if you've seen Gianluca Sartori's session. Halfway through the session, his session changed into a database corruption challenge. So we might as well improvise. It can't be that bad. Right? The worst thing that can happen is if the internet fails on us. Let's see. And this track is a BI track. I'm not sure. I think this is more. Yeah. Okay, that's better. I think it's more DBA-like stuff. But let's see. I think we've seen this one, right? Is there anything on it that you... Oh, yeah, after this there's, after the sessions there's a raffle, so you can win stuff. And then after that there's a, an evening session. I think there's a general questions and answer, let's geek out kind of thing. And they'll open the bar. So, yay. Let's geek out and have a beer. Right. And sponsor is always important. I organize SQL Saturday in Holland. From the Netherlands, if you haven't picked up my accent yet. I had one yesterday, a person yesterday said, "You sound American." Really? I don't sound American, do I? I know. Some people say I hear a little bit of Glaswegian.
You haven't got that. You know it really well because of the Dutch.
All right. Maybe I've learned not to do that anymore or something. Sponsors, very important. I organize events myself. They are beyond... Really? Okay. Nothing against them, but it's not on purpose. Sorry, people from Ireland, not on purpose. All right, title again, because I just copied the slides across. A little bit about me. I'm a Dutchman. In case you have any questions about the Netherlands, sorry, I have never in my life been inside a coffee shop. I don't know how that works. I can't tell you. I don't smoke. I have no business in a coffee shop. What I do know is that you guys have a smoking ban in public places. We have the same thing, which is awkward if you have a coffee shop to run, right? So we changed the law. You are now allowed to smoke cannabis inside a coffee shop, not cigarettes. That would be illegal. I'm sure if there's because there are government officials that go inside pubs and check this. I'm sure they skip the coffee shops. They'll throw them out the window. Is that a normal cigarette? Out. Yes, I'm not sure what Neil is doing with the deck and the demos and the stuff afterwards. If you have any questions, get in touch with me. I'm here and I'm here. Just find me. I promise all the time that I'll upload my deck, and I forget a lot. So if I do, contact me again. I won't be insulted, I promise. I'm just really busy and stuff flows out of my inbox really quickly. Not an excuse, I know, but how it goes. I've been a DBA since 1989, not with SQL Server, obviously. That was midway in the 90s. And I've done developing and in systems that don't even exist anymore. Lots of stuff. That's already 26 years ago, right? Getting old. Anyhow, 27. No, don't do that. I had my 45th birthday last week, and my girlfriend gave me a model of a Porsche. You're not having a real midlife crisis, but here, Don't you dare. So, here's a little bit of what I thought we could talk about. Since we have an hour and a half and we're not a big group, this is cool. We're going to talk a little bit of how our jobs as a DBA, or if you're not a DBA but you do BI stuff and you want to put some databases in Azure, but you need to back them up, or even have a local database and you want to move it into Azure, or between a SQL database in an Azure VM and an Azure SQL database, or just make backups of your Azure VM SQLs. That's sometimes also weird. We'll talk a bit about all these things. I've got a little bit about how storage works in Azure, a little bit. There's how do we do local backups, because I also told in my abstract that we're done with that, right? We know how to make backups. If you're a DBA and you don't know how to make backups, might as well not show up for work in the morning. Having said that, I keep running into corruptions more and more lately. This is weird. This has to do with backups. I'll talk a little bit about that. It has not much to do with Azure, but I wanted to warn you guys anyway of what I'm seeing in the field. We know how bad corruption can get. This has nothing to do with the topic again. There was a guy called Steve Stedman in the US, and on his blog he did a database corruption challenge. And for 10 weeks in a row he gave out corrupted databases. Here's the database, it's broken, go fix. And there'll be points for whoever fixes it first or just fixes it. And after 10 weeks we'll have a winner. Winner after 10 weeks, Rob Farley, a good friend of mine from Australia. I was second, you were third, but we were so close.
I was with someone else, with a guy from North England, I think.
All right.
Abrahams, maybe?
No.
Yeah, we were sharing the third place between 2 or 3 guys. So.
It was really cool challenge to do. If the databases are still there, the challenges are still there. If you want to play around with something that you hopefully never see in production, go check out. If you Google for database corruption challenge, you'll find it. He has 10 interesting challenges there. It was pretty cool to fight that. Now, did I just put 2 agendas in here? This one is cooler. Let's go with this one. Let's just continue. Now, one thing that it seems funny to do this in a session where you're supposed to have a room full of DBAs or something that know about backups, but I keep running into people who have no idea about this, and I just want to warn the world that this is around. There's forever and ever, since the internet started, well, maybe a bit later, we've not just downloaded scripts from the internet and used it for backups. We're DBAs, we don't trust anybody. The only script that we trust is the one that we wrote ourselves, and we shall write everything ourselves, right? Every DBA has done this. Over the years, you've written your own scripts, even though something similar is available on the internet, right? Sound familiar? We did this for backups as well, write our own backup stuff, because who trusts the maintenance plans in SQL Server? They're a bit weird. And also, you can't script those things. You just have to click through a GUI. I don't like that personally. I am a PowerShell fan, so if it doesn't support PowerShell, then I'm lost. But times have changed a bit. There's a lot of good stuff on the internet available today from people that have written it, and other people have started using it, and it's been tested and tested and tested. And it's become sort of the de facto standard, if you will. If you now talk to a group of DBAs in a room and you go, okay, what kind of backup solution do you use? I bet you half the people will say Ola Hallengren. So let's do that here. What kind of backup solution do you use? Is it Ola Hallengren? Nobody. Nobody. Okay, this is interesting. You use it? Okay, perfect. Oh, interesting. Okay, Ola Hallengren. It's really simple. You go to ola.hallengren.com. He's got a script called maintenancesolution.sql. You download it. You stick it in your maintenance, your query window. You press F5. and it generates a bunch of jobs on your system without schedules. Nothing will start running out of the blue. And all you need to do is give schedules to the jobs that you want running, like the full backup, the diff backup, the log backup, the checkDB. Just give them appropriate schedules and you're good to go. It has really smart defaults. A lot of people use it, so it is fairly bug-free. There's not a lot of known issues with it. The smart defaults are log backups. Only make a log backup if the database is in full. If I switch a database to from simple to full, the log backup won't work. You have to make a full backup first. It will do that for you. Or it will not make log backups until the full backup has come by. You can swap, you can change and see what you want to do. Rebuilding indexes only if needed. CheckDB does smart stuff there. It can see if you're using always on availability groups, so it will make the backups of the logs of the right location. If you're using log shipping, it will know not to make its own transaction logs because that would screw up the log chain. It knows all these things. It will think for you a bit. I like the way Ola has done things. If you want to do exceptions, here's the main thing and between maintenance plans and Ola Hallengren scripts. If you create a maintenance plan on a server and you have 10 databases and you say, okay, back up everything, and then you make a big database and you want it backed up every month instead of every week or something. So you have to put an exception in. So you say, accept this one in the maintenance plan. From then on, it doesn't say all databases except this one. It says these databases. And if you add another one, it won't be backed up because you've excluded one and now it has a list of databases to do. In Ola Hallengren scripts, you can say all databases minus that one. And if you then add another database, it will just be backed up, no problems. It will just skip the one you told it to skip. I personally, I work for Dutch government. We use it all over the place. You can, on Ola's site, you can find a list of like banks across the world that use it. What I even have, oh yeah, here we go. People like Buck Woody and Paul Rendell strongly advise you to use something like Ola Hallengren. It's good stuff. There's alternatives. Sean McCarn is here, one of the speakers. They have a solution. I've not played with that one, honestly, but he knows his stuff, so it's probably very good as well. What's it called? Does anyone know that? Sean's Minion, yeah, Minion backup. Free stuff, so should be good.
People were complaining that it's written in PowerShell.
This I.
And some sysadmins they were allowing DBAs to use PowerShell.
Okay.
It was a big debate why it's an application like any other, and why it's not going to allow you to do anything you couldn't do in Management Studio or whatever. So he was always having this quarrel, with
PowerShell. Everything will be PowerShell. Most Microsoft tools like Exchange, the user interface just makes PowerShell scripts in the background and calls PowerShell interfaces. There's no way around it. That's how it's going to work. The new Hyper-V servers, not the Hyper-V, but these container things that are coming up. You can't. They don't even have to connect the Active Directory. You cannot do policy injections or something with it. You have to use PowerShell. They won't have an interface, nothing. I don't get why you would be so afraid of PowerShell. I really don't get it. At work where I am, we have it's a cluster. It's bare metal cluster with Windows Server 2008 and SQL Server 2008 R2 on it, and we have created a pile of PowerShell, about this big, and we give it to the ops guys. The ops guys go, without us touching it, and they are not SQL Server experts, they're just operations in general for Windows and everything. They know that SQL Server, but they're not specialists or something. And what they do is, shut down the old cluster, change the role of the cluster in SCCM, in the Windows Systems Center, then boot to new machines automatically with PowerShell. It connects to the same storage, installs an operating system, in this case Windows Server 2012 R2, installs SQL Server 2012, then attaches the storage, shuts down SQL Server, grabs the master model and MSDB from the other one, and brings it up again. So while keeping all your data, all your logins, everything the same, you've upgraded the hardware, the OS, and the SQL Server version fully automatically. I love PowerShell. I don't have to do this myself on the weekend. The script does it for us. This for us. Now, why make backups? Really, I've had so many discussions with people that say, we have RAID, we don't need backups, or we mirror, we don't need backups, or in Azure, Azure makes backups for us. Yeah, true, but have you seen it? This is what, can you see this, guys? This is what it does. If you have a basic tier, 7 days of history, and it goes up to 35. I don't know about you, but I need to keep stuff for 10 years. So I need to make a copy every now and then. The database cannot disappear after 35 days. So, and it becomes more complex these days, right? It also, you have a database that you have to keep for 10 years, but that was the old days. That was easy. Just buy a lot of storage and just keep stuff for 10 years. These days, databases become toxic after a while. If there's rules, if you have personally identifiable information, P2 as the Americans would call it, inside a database, and your customer leaves you or something, if it's a private person and not a company, you have to delete their data after so many times, and and let's not even talk about credit card compliance stuff and whatnot. Your data can become toxic. You're not even allowed to have it anymore. Or, somewhere in the middle, you have to know who has it and how many copies you have. Where is it? You have to encrypt it maybe. Things have become more complicated. And just relying, if you put that same data, just relying on, I'm sure they do a good job. I'm sure this is true, what it says. I'm sure they do what they say. But still relying on the fact that they have a copy for you that they keep for 35 days, yeah, sure, but it might not comply with what I have to do. I need to make a copy of it as well and keep it longer. So this is why you still make your own backups. And you may want to have copies for dev and test environments. There's this big debate, right? Do you use production information on your dev systems? You're not allowed to, officially. Even if you read the Microsoft licenses. If you use Developer Edition, you're not supposed to have production data on it, or you're using the wrong license. You may want to be careful there. Yeah, this could be fun in an audit. This is production. No. Well, production data, but it's not production. Well, how would we know? So you have to be careful there as well. And there's always data that needs to be moved back and forth, databases, even if it's generated data or something. You can't do all your testing on like 5 rows, right? Did you guys run into this where a developer has 5 rows in a database and it comes through the test and you put it in production on the real database and it just crashes? I had one, like a month ago. They called me up, Andre, we have a stored procedure that runs for 20 minutes. It's supposed to be done in 2 seconds. Can you check? Did you change anything? Yeah, we had a code change. They're honest. Turns out, stored procedure, varchar max, and it takes a comma-separated values thingy, and it had a T-SQL split function. But the nature of the thing was, it was something like, if somebody lives in a house and applies for something, I have to say something a lot. I work for the government. I'm not allowed to tell what it exactly does. but applies for something. They feed the number of IDs of people that live in the same house, so they can do some checking. So these comma-separate lists should have what, 1 to 5 numbers, right? How many adults live in the same household, right? On average, numbers into the stored procedure. So I'm thinking that wouldn't take 20 minutes. Somewhere, somebody in the testing run changed by accident an and into an or, and everybody in the country was in that list. So for Holland, this is 17 million people. We were lucky, small country, ish. So 17 million values in a comma-separated list get stuck into that parameter, and then with a T-SQL split function, that took 20 minutes. I was actually pleasantly surprised that SQL Server just thought, I'll do that. It takes a bit longer, but no worries. So this is also why you need data here and there. You need to move some databases across, and sometimes they're bigger than you think. You can't just generate your little bit of test data all the time. So there's lots of reasons to do this. And last thing, going between SQL Server and Azure SQL database back and forth is a bit strange. I don't know if you've tried to create a backup of an Azure SQL database. There is no such thing. You can export it. It would still be in Azure SQL database.
Yes.
If you want it on premises or in an actual SQL server, well, Microsoft Azure SQL database is also an actual SQL server. You're just not allowed to back up and restore to it. No back files. Now, this.
Restore from a previous version, geotagger. You can create a backup. What you couldn't put back on.
Be different. This is what I found out when preparing for this. Doesn't work, and then you look and oh no, different now. Lots of stuff, very different.
I just looked at the portal. Everything's changed like again.
Yeah, this is.
I just created a new database, and it's just very different.
So this is the thing, and we're going to see. I'll demo some stuff. We have good amount of time, so I'll show you how to work with these credentials and how to back up files to blob storage. And it's not even that complicated, but they've changed stuff along the way. So every time you think, oh, this is too complicated, it doesn't work. No, it's not complicated. They just changed it, and then also this one, human error. This is why you make backups. If you say I have RAID, I have like a mirror. If my database breaks, there's no problem. The other disk will grab it or something. Not if a developer throws away something, or a user or whatever. Stuff can go seriously wrong, and I've seen. Every time I think I've seen most of the weird cases where data is missing or broken or databases break or something, I see new stuff. And I seriously think SQL Server is a really solid product. You need to hammer it really hard before it gives up. The only time I've ever seen it corrupt is when the disk system is lying to SQL Server. When the disk subsystem says, yeah, I've saved it, it's on disk, you can trust me, and then SQL Server trusts that, and then stuff breaks. I have seen cases where the disk system says, I'm having trouble saving this, it failed, and SQL Server just kept retrying, and it just wouldn't break, it would still come up nicely. At some point, the SQL Server would even blue screen and stop, but you reboot the server with the silly storage underneath that was broken, SQL Server would still be whole, as long as the SAN or whatever was underneath doesn't lie. Then you're fine. Now, one thing before we dive into the actual Azure stuff, this is fairly new. I see this a lot these days. With a lot, I mean 3 times in this year already. VSS-based snapshot backup solutions. There's a lot of vendors out there that do this, where you have all your databases maybe in Hyper-V or VMware, so they're all virtualized, and they use a centralized backup mechanism to grab just a backup of your VM. Sounds like a good idea, but be careful. This has already happened to me, not me at the government thing, but 3 other locations where if you do this in a system that has SQL Server, the driver that makes your backup will shut down or freeze. It's called freezing the I/O on a drive. It will freeze for a second. You can see that in the error log of SQL Server. I/O frozen on this database. And when all the I/O is frozen, the backup solution can just grab a copy of the disk because that's just a file. Now, because copying takes much longer, it could take up to hours, depending on the size, of course. They only freeze the I/O for a few seconds or a second, and then save the differences that they have later, the copy on write stuff, somewhere else. Now, if that somewhere else is also on the same disk, you're going to run out of buffers pretty quickly if you have a big database and you're doing a rebuild index or something at the same time. And at some point, you're going to see one of these. It's called vol snap errors. You may want to check your SCOM or whatever you want to use for monitoring if you're using this kind of solution. Vol snap error 25 or 27, especially the 25. If you see that, it means I ran out of space, I panicked, and I threw away the diff stuff, and I've put the old data back. So you lose the changes that it has done up to now. About 2 seconds later, you will see SQL Server go, trying to read something, but it's not there anymore. Stale read error, and then break. It will corrupt your database, and it will start dumping memory continuously until you restart, throw away the database, and restore database and do it again. And this was repeatable. With something simple, and I won't name the names of the vendors of these products because they all do the same, because they use the same interface. So it's not about the vendor, but about how you use this backup. If you have your SQL servers in Hyper-V or in VMware, and you use a generalized tool to make backups of the VMs, watch out for vol snap errors. They can corrupt your database. Be careful there.
Similar thing happens when you vMotion across and you get that stunning for up to 5-10 seconds sometimes.
Yeah.
And then move, it just crashes. Well, it doesn't necessarily crash, it will fail over always on groups and things like that.
Yeah, vMotion, same thing. As soon as it has to freeze the I/O, but the I/O is not frozen, it's actually very busy, so it has to keep it somewhere. And if that runs out of space or it does something wrong, I've seen it a couple of times already. So be careful there. All right, the Azure SQL database first. Not a lot to talk about. It's very simple. Microsoft does an automatic backup. As soon as you create a database, it starts making a backup. As soon as you create it, the first backup is made. It will make one full backup a week. It will make a differential every day and log backups every, 5 minutes. When it will make the full backup and the differential depends on the load of their systems. They might spread it out a bit. It's not at midnight or something. And also, you can't touch it. They don't tell you where they keep the databases, right? They are stored in geo-redundant accounts. That means they're not kept in just the same data center. We'll get to that later. So if a data center burns down, you'll still have your backups. You'll be fine. You'd have some downtime, no, for sure. But has a data center burned down? No, right? Haven't heard of that yet.
But it was this Amazon like 2 years ago, it blew up in Ireland, didn't it? And it was like, because one website, Spanish website I usually check, it was down for 2 days.
2 days.
It was in the Amazon.
I was fortunate enough to have had a tour in the Azure data center in Dublin. And before you go in, they make you sign a document. There was a 3-month check before that to see if they actually allow me in the data center. And then when you go into a meeting room and they go, okay, let's start the tour. Guys, phones on the table. You have to put your phone on the table, no pictures, nothing. And there's one in front of the group and somebody in the back of the group to see if you're not walking into somewhere you shouldn't be. And they show you the whole data center. Now what's cool is there's signs that's on doors that say no visitors, nobody allowed behind this door at all times. And they just open the door and let you in. So we really saw everything, and it's interesting. They in Ireland there's what can I tell? There was a few things that I'm not supposed to say, but there was I have to be careful here a bit. Let's record it. The oh, sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so my voice is leaving me sometimes. Now there is no AC in the whole data center, nothing at all. The air is cooled by air from outside. There's a floor, like the third floor of the building or something, is not a floor, it's just air mixing area. And they use something that's called swamp cooling. This comes from Louisiana, where in the swamp in America they have these, on a really hot day they hang hot towels in front of the window and the wind blows through the not hot towels, wet towels. Wet towels, and it cools the air just a little bit, just enough to make it a bit bearable. And that's what they use in the Azure data centers. They have big boxes with cardboard in it that gets sprayed with water, and then the air gets flown through, and that cools it down just a bit, and it's enough. They don't use AC at all. How cool is that? There's a lot more, but I can't talk about a lot of that. But the thing that I noticed is that it's a big structure, and there's 5 data centers inside the big structure, so it's not just one big data center. And the first data center was like any other data center I've ever seen. No surprises. The last data center was a complete evolution, revolution even, from the first one. They were even talking about tearing down the first one because it was cheaper than keeping it. I worked for big banks in Holland, and they build a new data center every 30 years or something, and it looks exactly like the old one. So I like the way these data centers are being built and how this all works, how they learn from this stuff to make it cheaper and more affordable for everybody. Same thing with SQL Server. The stuff that's in SQL Server 2016, a lot of it comes because they're running it at scale in the Azure data centers. They've learned so many things now that they use it themselves, Microsoft, and they fix stuff, like bugs that were in there and that were on a list like, yeah, we won't fix that, now suddenly get fixed because they run into troubles with it. So I kind of like the fact that this Azure is taking off, that Microsoft starts running their own stuff, right? Now, the main thing that you have to remember about Azure SQL databases, even though Microsoft makes backups for you, and you can restore those backups, that's only within an Azure SQL database. You cannot restore to your own SQL server. You cannot get the backup file. This is not possible. Maybe next week this will be different. This is what it's like today, right? They've changed a lot of it already. What you need to do is make an export. This is called a backpack. You'll find this in Management Studio. It's confusing. There's 2 things, DACpack and backpack, DAC and BAC. DACpack is what developers use to develop quickly. It contains the structure of a database, and they don't have to tell a database alter table, add a column. They don't have to do that. They just send the DACpack to the database. It contains an image of how the database should look, and the DACpack itself figures it out. It just looks at the old structure. I have the new structure. Oh, I need to add a column. That's not for this. What you need to use here is a backpack, and the backpack will make an export for you of the entire database. Now, as you can see here, the built-in backup from Microsoft. Everything is yes, not important, but this no is important. Restore to on-premises. That's the thing you have to remember. Even though the backups are automatic, you can't touch them. If you want a copy from your Azure SQL database for yourself on-premise, in your own SQL Server that you've installed yourself, can't do. You have to do this DB export, which is called a backpack. Now, one important thing, let's see if I have more slides or else I'm just going to show it. But yeah, here we go. One important thing, the backpack is like a BCP out of all the tables. It exports the structure of your database and then BCPs out all your tables and puts it in one file called a backpack file. One major drawback of that, it's not transactionally consistent. You can be exporting one table and in the meantime somebody else inserts something in another table and vice versa, and you have stuff in your backup of your database that's just not right. Not cool, right? So what do you do if you want a transactionally consistent export of your database? You make a copy inside Azure SQL database of your database. So you do create copy of, you do create database as copy of other database. That makes a second one. You can even do that on a second SQL server inside Azure, which is just a logical thing. It says SQL server in Azure, but it's not a SQL server. So you have now you have a transactionally consistent copy that you're not attaching to, that nobody's changing data on that, and you make a backpack export of that. That's how you get transactionally consistent copies. The meter will start running though. If you make a backup of a database, now you have to. You pay twice the storage, that kind of stuff. And if you have the expensive ones, I think I have pictures of that as well, but it can get quite expensive. This is where you'll find it. In Management Studio, you go tasks, export data tier application. There's also extract data tier application. That would be the DAC pack. This is the backpack. Very confusing naming conventions. But so these extract, register, and upgrade, this all has to do with these DAC packs, where you want to keep the structure of two databases in sync. That's what you use DAC packs for. Export is the one that you're looking for. It's actually not that slow. I thought, ooh, BCP every table out. I've tried it with quite a big database, and saw some interesting things. What I did was I tested out my Azure SQL database stuff with I wanted a big-ish database. Now the Stack Overflow database is about 90 to 100 gigabytes. And it takes a few steps because the Stack Overflow database is available. It's a nice testing database. You can just grab it and use it for your own testing purposes. It has a lot of text in there. It's a fairly simple model, so I like to use it for a test. But it's available in XML format, and there's like a GUI somebody written to change that into a SQL server, or to bulk insert it into a SQL server, and then you have to make a backup of that, and it's a lot of work to make that happen. Now, fortunately, Brent's already done that, and he has a database backup file of the Stack Overflow database of April or something available for testing purposes. And if you just Google Brent Ozar Stack Overflow database or something, you'll find the blog post where he explains how to get it. You can just download it from him. Don't have to put in an email address or something. It's totally, he did all the work. Now, what I noticed was, I didn't notice it myself. I was very aware of the cost difference because a friend of mine, Tobias Kaprowski, who is one of the other speakers here, did a session on a Saturday or something, and he demoed this one, the P11 Premium. Databases go up to 11. The P11 Premium. See the cost here per month? 6,000 euros. He demoed it, forgot to switch it off. Week later, he wanted to demo it again. Notice that he still had it switched on. Cost him, I think, 1,600 euros or something. Expensive mistake. I needed it for my Stack Overflow import. Maybe I could have done with a smaller one, but I've tried it with this one first, the 10 DTU standard, for €12.65 a month. Much better price. But when I started the backpack import, there's something called DTUs. You see that here? Database transfer units or something. Transaction units, it's a combination of CPU memory and disk I/O, and how fast can it go? and how fast it can go is 10. Somebody tried to crack this algorithm and was pretty close, according to some insiders, but if you Google for it, you might find a calculation of how you figure this out. But I saw the DTU utilization graph on my machine. Do I have? Is that here? Yeah. My DTU utilization graph was up to 100 for the whole night. When I checked it in the morning, it was up to 100% still, and I thought, ooh, I'm just hitting this 10 DTU on this bulk import, and I can't go any further. So what I did was during the backpack import, I switched it from this to this. You can do this online. How cool is that? My import did not fail, did not crash, did not time out. It just continued while we were putting more resources underneath this. I thought that was pretty cool. And an hour later, my import was done. And I could actually see it. This is on the machine where I did the backpack import. So you can see it hammered the CPUs quite nicely. It was quite a big VM that I was using. And the resource utilization went an hour later, half an hour later, slightly over half an hour later, it went to about 80%. So I knew that I had the right sized machine. I was hammering it and it was importing it nicely. So this is some tip, maybe if you want to import a large amount of data, switch it to a bigger VM, do all the imports, and I've confirmed this with some friends that have done a bunch of migrations to Azure SQL Database. Just move it up to the big ones, import your data, and then switch it back down. Just don't, if you're playing around with this, don't forget to switch it down. Elastic pools will let you set like a limit or something, right?
Yeah,
Still.
it's still got a large cost of it. Not do things that are going to smash it.
Yeah, that's gonna be an expensive one there. And here's an example of this copy. This is from Azure Bootcamp in Germany. I did the screenshot, but what you see here, the syntax is really simple. You have a database in Azure SQL database. You connect to it with Management Studio, and all you type in is create database name as copy of, and you can do it on the same SQL, and then obviously you have to name it differently, or you can get it from another instance. So you can go to your dev machine, and if you have the right rights, if it's in the same management part of Azure, you can do create copy as copy of, and boom. A while later, you've got a copy. That works with backup restore underneath, I'm assuming. I'm fairly sure Microsoft won't use an export import in that part, since they're making backups anyway. So, like I said, not much to say about Azure SQL Database. There's just no way, besides an export. Well, you can export it yourself. You can have an application. You can bulk BCP out. Would that work? BCP out? I'm sure it will. Yeah, that would work, right? You can do it yourself. You can do some PowerShell. The only thing that I want you to remember is you cannot use a backup, SQL Server backup from the backup mechanism. Microsoft does this for you, and they do not give you the files at the moment. I don't know. Let's see if this changes. I think it would be a really good idea if they did, but sorry?
You'd have people coming out of Azure, you wouldn't want that.
I don't think they'd really mind that, because the egress cost would be quite. You have to paint to chuck the data out.
I think there's a bit of a new Microsoft for the last few years, where they have stopped protecting their environment that much. They're now opening up. There's Linux in Azure. There's Linux support on Windows 10. They're gonna bring out SQL Server on Linux, have it run on Linux. How cool is that? I'm not sure. I do know that a lot of people have to rewrite April Fool's Day blog posts. If you Google for it, April Fool's SQL Server on Linux, you'll find dozens. and now it's true. So people have to change this. Okay, let's look at the storage for a bit.
Can you back up with tools though, can't you, out of Azure? Like, I think Redgate can back up.
Yeah,
I've never used it on much.
Redgate has come out. What's the new thing that they're doing? It's in beta now. Redgate has this data management thing that they've now got in beta. Looks really promising, where you can track where all your data is going for if you want to follow it, and it also does imports into Azure Data Warehouse, and it can make copies, and it can make copies that are cleaned up before they go to the development team. And I'm sure they use intermediate steps with VMs and whatever you and I would do, but it's just in one GUI, and it makes you, and it is logged, and you can follow it. And looks promising. I've only seen screenshots, so what do I know? But I'm gonna kick the tires of that one when it comes out. Looks interesting, but Redgate doesn't have a secret API. They have to do the same thing. If we can't get the backup of SQL Server, Azure SQL database, but have to use an export, so do they. There's no secret API there. Okay, let's look in, and this is where we go on to databases in a VM, and how you make backups and restore those, because this is where it gets. Some of them are very interesting. Some advice I saw on the internet was also very interesting. I thought, who would do that? So there's a few types, only a few types of backing of where files go. If you read the documentation, you'd be spending the whole day. There's blobs, pages, tables, queues. There's lots of stuff, and it can be quite confusing. But all you have to remember is how the data gets stored, and there is local redundancy, zone redundancy, geographical redundancy, and read access geographical redundancy. Local means in the data center. Local does not mean one disk or one machine. It means 3 copies in the data center. And they do it, and they make the copies in such a way that they are never in the same 19-inch rack. So if a rack goes down, no worries, there's another copy. And they're also not in the same update zone. They have something, I don't even know if that's the right term these days, but and you can do this yourself with your services if you build them. If you build web servers and they need to be patched, there's a patch round that Microsoft automatically applies patches. You can say they need to be in different zones, so they never ever get patched at the same time. I want one of them to be up at all times. If you're patching, patch that one, and then that one on a different time. They do that with the storage as well. So these 3 copies will never ever be down at the same time because of patching. They will never ever be down at the same time because a whole 19-inch rack goes down because the power fails or something. That is a promise that they make. So a lot of people say local. That's not good. Talk to your SAN guys if they can do this. I'm surprised at what the answer would be, right? Would you think they can do the same thing? I don't think so. The SAN guys are like, ooh, yeah, I'm not sure. So local is actually pretty good, and you get 3 copies, and it's also the fastest. And your transaction is guaranteed. As soon as you've done something and it's saved in 3 locations. It does that at the same time. Now, the zone is basically still in the same geographic area, but in multiple buildings. So data center in Dublin, data center in Amsterdam, that kind of thing. And it's done asynchronous. So it does this first, local, and then copies it across. So, no, interesting that it still does 3. Not sure. Maybe I'm wrong here. I thought it would be copied across a different data center, but that seems to be what this one does, the geographic redundant, where it saves it locally first and then copies it across to a different data center. And you have 6 copies instead of 3. So it will make 3 here, then copy them across and make 3 over there. That seems to be the unit, 3 all the time. And then this one, the read access geographic one, is where you can actually read your data is available on the other side at all times. It's sort of like a readable secondary in always on availability groups. Similar. Now, there is a new thing. Have you heard of this one? Hot and cold storage. This is released like a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you've seen it. It's basically the exact same storage, but with a different pricing. It's an interesting thought. Have you heard of Amazon Glacier? Where you store something in long-term things, and it takes longer to get it out, and maybe longer to put it in, I don't know. Longer to delete it, and it's probably, and not sure about the pricing, but in Azure they have said moving stuff in and out of this cold storage is more expensive than the normal storage, which is now called hot storage, but keeping it there is cheaper. So the storage costs themselves are much lower than the normal pricing, but moving in and out is more expensive. Interesting, right? So you pay a premium on putting it there, but then maybe not even on putting it there, but just getting it out. Probably getting it out. Let's see what happens. This is still in a preview. So let's see what happens if it's done. But it's an interesting idea to keep your 10-year copies or something. Just put it in cold storage. Very easy to create, but if you create a storage account, there's a general purpose one, and that doesn't give you the option. So you have to switch the account kind to blob storage, and then it gives you the access tier. It will let you choose between cold and hot. There's a few different types of blobs. There's page blobs and there's block blobs. And page blobs are really good for changing them all the time, changing them, appending to them. Block blobs are not. So storing stuff in this cold storage is only supported with block blobs, no page blobs. Why this is important, we'll get to that, I'll show you. It has to do with backups in SQL 2014. Now, the last thing that you can do as well is just make files, put files there. Have a file share. Just like you would have on premises where you put your Ola Hallengren backups in a file share. You can now do that in Azure. This one is, that's all the way at the end, okay. Interesting location for a slide. I have a slide at the end that says, this is what the file share does, and all the way at the top it says SMB 2.1 only, not SMB 3. I did that slide 2 weeks ago, it's already wrong. SMB 3 is now also supported. Anyhow, sorry. There is something in Azure VMs that's called an automatic backup, an automated backup. So as soon as you create, when you just create a new virtual machine, that includes SQL Server. So if you have one of these VMs that has SQL Server on it because of licensing, you can choose if you want to have automated backups. And if you do that, you have this, I looked at it, it really means automated. There's nothing you can see that does that. There's nothing in the, maybe it's in the Windows schedule, but it's certainly not in the agent. The SQL agent does not have backup jobs or something. There's no maintenance plans, nothing. It just, in the background, you just see backups happening. It's magic. I'm sure they schedule it from somewhere else. When does it back up? Does it have a schedule like the Azure SQL database was once a week full backup, once per day and a differential? When does this happen? Nobody knows. It's not documented. How cool is that? It just makes backups. Don't worry. Trust us. Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure. There's a lot of settings that you can set. Well, no, actually. The retention and what credential you want to use to get to your storage and which storage URL you're using. So you create your own storage account, and that's where it will be stored at. This is done automatically. This is how you'll find it in Management Studio once it's set up for you. Screenshot is a bit weird here. It's all the way at the top. But if you use Ola Hallengren, you can actually do this yourself. Making your backups not locally to the SQL server on the VM, but straight into your storage is not hard. You can do that yourself. I'm using Ola here, but you can actually use SQL Server VMs yourself. Let's show you that. You've been staring at slides for a long time already, I just realized. Let's go to... Oh, did I lose the connection? Maximize this. Now, there we go. Oh, yes. There is... I've got a database here. Where is it? Stay there. Can I make this a little bit bigger? There we go. This is a database create. Right. This one. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, make this one a bit bigger. It's as easy as this. This is not even using Ola Hallengren. I've noticed that only one of you is using Ola Hallengren, so let's skip that and go to the backup as you know it in SQL Server. Just do create a backup database. So the normal command would be backup database to disk blah blah blah. Right? This is just two things here. Backup database to URL, and the URL must be your storage account. And I'll show you what that thing looks like as well, because this URL includes subdirectories and the extension, and not all subdirectories have to be there. It will create them for you, but one of them has to be there. I'll show you in a sec. And you have to use a credential that you've saved. Now, this credential is called SQL Backup, and you'll find it here. Security, credentials. This is the old management studio. It's almost impossible to read. I can zoom it on here. Let's do that, because that will be downloads. No, stop. Zoom it. Downloads. Zoom it. Copy. Go to here. Downloads, paste, zoom it, there we go. Okay, where's the window? Better. So, what you're putting in here is the name of the credential, so I've picked SQL Backup, and then you give it an identity, and the identity is actually the name of the storage account that I created. I'll show you the storage account in the web interface in a second. And the password will be this one. You can't type these things, you have to copy and paste. But I'll do that. Here's my dashboard. I'll go to resource groups. I have one that's called Inside SQL. And inside there I have a Inside SQL Store Auto. I was going to use cold and hot, I didn't. I'll explain in a second why not. Loading. Gives me a chance to grab some water. Interesting. Sometimes it goes really quickly, and then you click, and then something else just waits. I'll grab some water quickly. Is it there? No, not yet. Yeah, be careful not to stand in front of the speaker. Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. It just seems to hang here. Yeah, let's not wait for that. Let's just kill that and start again. Because the internet connection is TweetDeck. No, Azure. Start this one. There we go. My password is 6 dots, as you've seen. Here we go. Resource groups. Here's Inside SQL. And then we go to the Inside SQL Store Auto. And there we go. Now, what you see here is this is the store I made. This is a locally redundant one, and that password that I mentioned before is here. Here's access keys. You just click on those, and you get 2 of them, and you can recycle them if you want to. But you just grab this key, you click on copy, and you go to your VM, and you paste that here twice. That's how you get that password in. That's the thing that you need to make this work. As soon as you then do this, it will go to this Inside SQL Store auto.blob.core.windows.net. That's standard. And what I made is inside, show you that as well. There's a blobs page here. And if I load that, you will see something called test. And inside test, you'll see one-time backup and system and a bunch of backups. Which one did I use? No, not this VM. Go away. The other VM. I did test and then one-time backup and then the backup file. So if I change this to live demo and press OK, it just made a backup. And if I now go to refresh this, you will see it created the live demo folder itself. This works really nicely with Ola Hallengren because he has a default naming convention. He does system name, database name, and then full differential or log, and then the files are in there, and it will just create the log files, the directories for you as long as you point it to the good root folder. You have to have this one root folder. That's all you need to do. So this is how you create backups into storage directly without having to put it on the VM. Pretty cool, right? Now, this failed on, because I wanted to do this on cold storage. I have a store cold and a store hot here, and I thought I'll just make all my backups on the cold store, and then every now and then I'll move certain backups to the hot store. This was my plan. Unfortunately, I was just using SQL Server 2014, and what you see here, this says page blob. That's what SQL Server spits out, page blobs. That's not supported in the new cold and hot store. This is one of these interfaces that just newly introduced, only block blobs, so this won't work. SQL 2014, unfortunately, wrong size. Now, I thought maybe we can change that. A different way to copy files, I don't know if you've seen this one. Let me find this here. Is it here? No. Is that window closed? Then it must be on the other machine. Yeah, here it is. Hard to read, but let me zoom in here. It's called AZ Copy. AZ Copy, for as far as I've seen, is the best way to get files from on-premises to the cloud and back, and it's a copy tool. It's the copy the copy tool that you should use for moving files around in Azure and also locally. You can even point it to, and this was my plan, from some server. You can say, copy this file from the cold store to the hot store, and it won't move it across where you are. It will just give Azure the instructions to do that, and the file will move between the cold and the hot store, and not go out of Azure with the cost, and then back inside, which would be expensive. It's pretty cool. You get really long command lines though. As you can see here, source with the whole URL, and then destination with the whole URL. Then you get the source key, which is that same key that I just showed you have to put in, and of course the destination key, and then I did /s, which means all the subdirectories as well. That's how you do it. Unfortunately, I tried to do this. There's even an option that says which blob storage you want, and I said, okay, make it block, because I have page, but I want to move it into cold store, and I need block. I said, no, can't do it. The only way, if you have page, only way right now, today, if you have page blob stored in Azure, and you want to move it to a block blob storage, like the cold storage, you have to take it out, move it to a normal file on your Azure VM or to on-premises, and then move it back in a different format. Uncool. Maybe they'll change it, I don't know. Which tool, oh no, I would.
You tried going to another VM and then cutting it back?
Yeah, so the other thing I was thinking, that would work, because then you have a local file again. Also, the one version of SQL Server that does spit out block blobs, 2016. If you use the latest and the greatest, yeah, I've got a 2016 here. This is something that, here we go. Here's my hot storage, which is both hot and cold. If they're of that type that you can choose, they need to be block blobs. And this just works. Not now. Already exists. Okay, new DB 1. And that works. So 2016 does support this. Now, here's a quiz question to see if you guys are awake. What's the difference here with the previous command? Let me blow this up a bit. Do you see a difference? Yeah, exactly. I did not put a credential. This is something else that has changed. So how does it know? The credential now has a naming convention that you have to use. Here's the credential. Let me make that a bit wider. This is the main thing that if you're using backups to storage in Azure, this is the main thing you're going to run into. Before 2016, make that credential with those keys that you find in the user interface. 2016, create the credential that has the name of the full thing. This is how it knows. You have to give it that long, stupid name. And then call it shared access signature, and then give it not the key, something else. This is called, what you see here is, the key is here, it's in the middle somewhere, but there's more. And this is called a shared access signature. This is new, and it's not really well documented that you have to put that there. But what you do, if you Google Bing a Microsoft website, it comes up with like a 20-step plan to load a PowerShell library and create this shared access signature. It has features. It can, instead of the 2 keys that you had, hand out a key, and if you don't want to use it anymore, you cycle the keys so they don't work anymore. Now you can give out these shared access signatures, and you can put in the URL when they expire and what subfolder they have access to. You can go a lot further, but it's really not well documented. And the 20-step plan that Microsoft gives you is all PowerShell. So here's a quicker way of doing that, because it's not that hard. what you do is you download a free tool called Azure Storage Explorer. Is it Redgate? It's free, this one. I don't know if this is Redgate's one. I don't think so. This is a free, little bit buggy, but just use it for this. You go to the directory that you want to go, like here, and you click on, so you go to the account. First you put in a, here we go, add account. So you put an account name here. So that would be that URL of your storage name. Then you put the key. That will be that key that you have to copy and paste again from the interface. And then you use HTTPS and you save it and then you go into it. And then you go to the folder that you want to use, go to security, go to shared access signatures, click on all the things, and then generate signature. Now this creates a whole URL. What you want is everything after the question mark. So from here, that is what you need. Took me a while to figure this out. You copy that and you put that here. See that SV? Same thing. That's what you put there. So no longer the key, that thing that I just showed you, that's what you put in there. Then together with this naming convention, that's how 2016 does it. And then you can just say, hey, backup database to URL without having to even point to the key that you need. And you can have multiple ones because you'll have one and it knows because of the URL itself. That's how it does that. It's implied stuff in there. And now you can use block blobs and just back them up to hot and cold storage and use AZ copy to move them. That will just work. If you're using anything before 2016, no such luck. What you're going to have to do to move it to the new cold hot store stuff, make a local backup and then use AZ copy to copy it across to the right one, something like that. But as soon as you use this feature of SQL Server, it will create page blobs, not block blobs.
But in the key generator, it was like expiring date and things like that. So that means that key wouldn't be valid after the expiration date.
Yeah. Yeah. This is where 99.99 comes back again. I haven't figured out how it works exactly, if it logs it somewhere and if it's checked or if it's just only in the URL and not there somewhere. I think it's only in the URL. I haven't seen anything like that. So you could change it manually. And so it's not a good security at all. But it seems to be the way they made it for now, so this seems to be the new way. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll come out with a service pack in 2014 and suddenly this way will start working in 2014 as well, in older versions of SQL Server. I don't know. That could be the case. It sounds like a smart thing to do, if you ask me. Because a lot of people that can't move their database for some reason to Azure SQL Database and are going to use SQL Server in a VM would probably also have an older version of SQL Server because the third-party supplier of the software just doesn't allow you to go to 2016 or something. We've all been there, right? I have an Excel sheet of, we've got these suppliers, this one needs to be on this version, that one needs to be on that version, this one doesn't support that. So this is the SQL servers that we're going to have. That's what you have to, and that's what you're going to have to live with. Now, two other cool ways to store, and this is an interesting one as well. You can also do this. Can you see what I'm doing here? The data and the log file are stored directly on the storage account. So not inside the VM on SQL's on Azure, but they're outside. They're on the storage account. So you're storing the data in the log file on the URL. You can do that on premises as well, right? If you have Hyper-V, your data and you have like a scale-out file server, your data and log file can be outside of the VM. That's no problem at all. This is similar, I guess. Interesting idea. I saw somebody suggest that you could use this to have a local SQL server on premises with the data and the log file in Azure. I'm pretty sure this is the stupidest thing that I've heard so far. Don't put your databases 100 kilometers away from your files that store the data. That will kill the performance. I don't know why you would say that. The idea is, I get that. The idea is unlimited storage. You don't have to buy anything anymore. This will go up to terabytes. This is a terabyte per file, I think it will support, but you can make multiple data files. And funny enough, this is 2014 and up, or 2012? Sorry, 2012 and up, I think. So not just 2016, but 2016 has something extra. Also, these files are page files because block blobs don't are not really well in updates and appending. So these are page blobs, so it knows the difference now. It will, if you back it up, it will make block blobs. If you put the data in a log file somewhere, it will make page blobs. It will do the right thing. So this is 2016. But what only 2016 will do, and not 2014, is these things. A backup database, and the secret is in the end. Let me move here. With file snapshot. This is interesting. In the same storage account, it will now, you will see files appear, and they look like full backups and log backups, but they're not. They're more like these VSS snapshot-based thingies. They're more like SAN snapshots. I could get the file. It's my storage account, so I could just say download. I got the back file, tried to restore it. It said, no, this is part of a file snapshot-based backup. You can't do that. Interesting way of doing that. The advantage here is you make a full backup, and then you make transaction log backups, but that's not really what you're doing. They're just called that way. All it does is create differentials, like differential snapshot-based backups of your database. So you could, in theory, make a full backup and then make log backups indefinitely, and it won't hurt you when you try to restore. You don't have to restore like 1 million transaction logs. It somehow figures out what to do. I've seen the restore command. I don't have it here, but the restore command, the only thing that normally when you do a restore of a database, you do restore the full backup and then restore all the logs until I'm done. With this, the restore command only points to the latest log backup that you did. Really confusing. I have to wrap my head around it. But that's what you tell it to do. And it will figure everything out and restore the database for you. Strange, huh? You can do that. You just the point in time recovery. You just point to just the latest transaction log backup, and tell it point in time to where. It's not the latest transaction. It's actually your whole database backup history that you're pointing to.
Some kind of deduplication.
I'm guessing there's deduplication and snapshot-based stuff. I know I know from the maybe. I don't know if this works that way, but I know from VSS-based backup things like professional snapshot VSS tools like VM or something that you use for Hyper-V and VMware backups. These guys make a snapshot, and then when they make the second snapshot, it's just the differences. But they don't keep the full file and then all the diff files, and then when you have to restore, you have to go through all that data. No, they have processing that goes afterwards that will just create a file that has all the differences in them. So the thing that is available the quickest is the latest backup. They somehow morph that into one file. They do post-processing on those files.
How big can that grow? listen, if you start adding differences and differences and differences, I mean, obviously, what you're saying is like if I change value A to B and I create
some interesting technology behind here that works different than you think it does, and I think it's the syntax that gets us. I think when we see log backup, but it's not. You're not making a log backup. It does a send snapshot somehow with deduplication things. So this syntax just confuses us. Maybe they'll change it. I don't know. But this file snapshot, and also the confusing thing that you can see it here. Let's go. Where is it? If I go into that will be. Is it inside SQL Store Auto? Where do I have it? Yeah, SQL Store Auto, SQL Data. There we go. So let's go in there. You can see the files. So if I go in here, SQL Data, here they are. Here's the MDF, LDF, here's the backup file, and here's the 3 transaction logs. And like I said, I've tried this. I took the backup file. You can just download it. No luck. You can't restore it. I had it locally. I said, okay, just restore. Yeah, no. This has been copied. This has been backed up with a file snapshot. You can't do this. Maybe I needed to grab them all. Oop. I'm losing stuff here. I'm still here. Yep, works. Maybe I needed to copy them all the log files, and then do the file I don't know. It's yeah. Let's find this out at some point. I don't know how that works. So there's a few slides left, and then I have one more thing to show. And let's show you the one more thing first, and then there is one more thing that you can do. If you go to, instead of blobs, you go to files, and then you create a new file share. I'll call it test, and I give it a 50 gigabyte quota. And I'll go to the test, and I'll click on connect. It gives me a command, a net use command, that I can copy. I'll zoom it now. This net use command, you can copy this thing and then replace the information that you need. So here says drive letter, so you can put a drive letter in, obviously. And then also here, storage account access key. This is again where you copy and paste that key. And I've done this already on this machine, so let's grab it here. Let's go this way. Control. See if that works. Yeah, here. So I've already done that on this system where I replaced the command with the whole key. You can't really see that very well here, but and this will give you a file share, and then you just use your standard backup mechanism and just copy it into file share. That might also be a way to get around this block blob versus page blob issue. I'm not sure. I haven't tested that, but here you run into the problem that this file share needs to exist after you reboot the system, so you have to make sure those credentials are saved somewhere or auto start it before it will work, so you have to keep that in mind as well. But if you don't want to do this straight from SQL Server with the credentials, you'd like to just use your own stuff and then just back up to a share, you could use this. That will work as well. Personally, I now that I've figured out how this credential stuff works with the differences in 2014 or 2012 and up, use 2012 and up, use these credentials where you just copy the key as a password, and in 2016 use this weird way to get this shared access mechanism thingy with the naming convention, so it works automatically Works for me. The backup to URL is actually quite cool. I like it. For me, the easiest way. And then you can copy your files around with the AZ copy, right? AZ copy is a pretty cool tool. Now, this is where you get the keys. This is where the backups are showing up. This is the basics of AZ copy. Just use source, destination. Oh, by the way, that can obviously source and destination can be local and remote, or both can be remote. Both cannot be local. If you want to use AZ copy for copying stuff around locally because you want to use one interface, sorry, it will complain. It'll say, no, one of them needs to be on Azure. Okay. So yeah, fine. I'm hoping somebody will come up with a robocopy that has this built in or something. That would be cool. Just use robocopy. And this is the
There's a VM in between. A local file store and a temporary dropping place. It's still in the cloud.
yeah.
Just go without.
For some reason, I want to keep it
Just end up with two AZ copy out and in, out.
out and in. Yeah, you could that you could do. A copy, yeah. But the storage mechanism works fine. The block storage. I don't really need to have the files available on a VM, but if you do, yeah, then AZ copy into block storage and then copy that across. Or AZ.
Storage, because premium storage attached to a VM is effectively
That would work.
it'll go, it's really fast.
A bit more expensive as well. You have to take care of that.
Chucking stuff around in the cloud.
Here's the sample of getting that weird shared access signature. And this one, I don't know. I would stay away from this, where you have your on-premises database with the files in Azure. I've even seen, is that here? No. I've even seen somebody say, put your data file in Azure so you have unlimited storage and your log file locally. This scared me. I have to think about that one. I don't know. Just how expensive is storage then? It's just, I don't know. Just buy SSDs. I do see this happening in the cloud though. Azure VMs, to me, it makes total sense to put the data in a log file on the block storage and not on the VM itself. Unless you want to play with having multiple block storage drives that connect one drive so you can use, you have like 500 IOPS per drive or something, and you premium storage, you can go up and up and up.
Shared across servers, so that means you've got one central location and you can share all your stuff around.
Yeah, so if you're going into that place where you just have lots of drives, so you have lots of IOs, and then this system will not help you. But for most databases, it should be okay. And here's the information on files versus blobs. If you want to use the file shares, SMB3 is really a lot better than the stuff before that. So as long as it didn't support it, I wouldn't use it. But now that it does, I'll look into that. That looks actually pretty cool. You have up to 1 terabyte per file, so not every database will fit. But then again, if you're brave enough to put a database of over 1 terabyte on an Azure VM, let's talk. That's interesting. I know they exist. I know it will work, but I've not seen it yet. I think we're close to time. No, we're over time actually. 20 past, right? 25 already. So if I would compress this into a minute, I would think that I've shown a few things where Azure SQL databases do not give you much options. It's either export or use the built-in backups, but that you need to stay inside Azure SQL database. The only way to get in and out of there is with the export and the import. And you have to make sure that you use the copy across to get it transactionally consistent. And if you put your SQL Server inside a VM, there's multiple ways to make backups. I personally like putting the backups directly on the block storage, and you have to use those credentials for that. They're really simple to set up, just do copy-paste of the credential. For older versions of SQL Server, the newer version, you need to use this really weird shared access thing, but you can generate that with that tool. That will be a compressed version of this talk, right? And then there's a file share, but I don't know. That credential stuff works for me. You like it so far? You have any questions?
What would you recommend for getting data from a blob store into a database?
You mean import?
Into Azure database?
I work a lot with, well, not a lot, but I work with PDWs, APS. And the thing that is very common to use there is Polybase, where you have your files inside Hadoop even, and you just pull it into Azure Data Warehouse or an APS with multiple streams of data. It goes really fast. And Polybase is now built into SQL Server 2016. Just the normal database that you have also has Polybase. So if you're doing imports of I'm not talking about database backups, if it's already a database backup, but just files, flat files. The new thing, try to look at, time's up, he says. I'm already 5 minutes over. But, sorry, try look into Polybase. Sorry. With that, I hope you had a great day, and there's 2 more sessions, I think, and then we'll have, I think it's time for a beer. All right? Thank you, guys.